grief is an integrator. It is a unifier. It helps our personalities, our perspective, our beliefs. It helps us to integrate new and higher vibrational ideas by literally, when you grieve, you erase neurons in the brain, which means you are erasing memories, you're erasing belief systems, you're erasing your relationship to what you're losing in your brain as well. So it leaves a neural circuitry that is fresh, and you're able to repopulate it with a new idea or a new experience, which is what we call mourning, right? We put grief is the crying, emotional release, and then mourning is the process that one goes through to change their behavior and relationship to the thing they lost. So transformative grief is all of it. It is like an objective perspective. When you can look at beyond the grief and the sadness, there is this huge magical experience that opens you up in ways you can't even imagine, because you have the emotional process. It's like it cracks open the heart and it creates a new light that shines on new information that you wouldn't see otherwise.
Broaderlands Podcast.
The opinions expressed on Broaderlands Podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands Podcast. Tracee, welcome to Broaderlands Podcast. What an honor to have you on.
So great to be here. We finally made it. Yay!
Yeah. You know, when I met you at the expo, I think out of everybody, I'm grateful to have met you and just connect with you because, I don't know, I just feel really connected to you, and I love your mind and your heart because you're a deep thinker. I think you're a mystic, a shaman, etc. And I just really appreciate your work you have done for humanity. So thank you.
Thank you. That's a magnificent, huge compliment.
No, thank you. And maybe before we get started, you could share a little bit about who you are and what you do, if you don't mind.
I can. So my name is Tracee Dunblazier. You can find me at TraceeDunblazier.com. I grew up in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was born demonically challenged, which means spiritually I had a lot of psychic attack, demonic attack. I was ultra sensitive, an empath, deeply emotional, but I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and my parents they couldn't show emotion. Back in their day, if you showed that level of emotion, they would give you a lobotomy. Like they were experimenting with mental health and different things to do with people. So I grew up never speaking about my spiritual experiences to anybody. I think I have always had a natural attraction to religion in general, not to specific religions, because I think that when you attach yourself to a religion, you sometimes lose sight of the growth that is intended for you as a spiritual being. Anyway, that's a whole other podcast. But I went to churches, many different kinds of churches, all the way through before I got into high school. Then I got into high school, and my experience, I was having a lot of night terrors, and so that all of those things informed my deep knowledge of the multidimensional world. And then I had to learn or practice how to begin to communicate it and how to connect with people who had those experiences. I'm a soul practitioner. I work with people, but I don't necessarily work in groups of people. That's why I always find myself in leadership positions, because I'm used to being by myself and holding this information for others, but on my own. So I've had to learn to really connect with big groups of people on that level. But that's so probably when I moved to New York for 10 years, and that was a whole coming out party of really recognizing my sense of power. And then when I came to LA was the point at which I started my career as a mystic.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. You said you're demonically challenged. Could you share a little bit
Mhm.
about that if you don't mind?
I can. So what I mean by that, demons in general are specific to Christianity and any form of Christianity. Other cultures don't see demonic, what we call demonic beings. Every culture has negative entities, and demonic beings comes from an indoctrination and a way of recognizing energy and creating separation from God, to the low beings, right? Satan fell from grace, and so there was a separation was created, and because of that separation, a perspective on what we think, uh, on how we see the building blocks of our spirituality, of who we are. That's what we call demons. Every human being has energy or emotion or entities that may have followed them through history, right? Something that becomes a demon is something that has, at one time, it was just energy, and then it was nurtured over thousands of years to become
Mm.
what it becomes. And our relationship to that thing is what formulates how, whether we call it a demon or the darkness or a shadow, or how fearful it is to us, how violent it is, whatever attributes it has, come from how we perceive it. And then what
Mm.
we have to do to master its presence and maybe recycle it into another form is how we gain our mastery as a human being.
That,
So all of the beings that were my night terrors were entities that came with me from multiple incarnations of my religious experience, right? So I came in already knowledgeable on world religions. So I was
mm.
never going to get locked into one way of thinking, uh, via culture, right? Or indoctrination. I was always going to see the world from a broader lens,
Mm.
right? So, uh, but I carried all the entities with me into this lifetime where I could be empowered to address them finally,
And
to complete those relationships.
you call that being multi-spirited?
Um, that is a part of multi-spirited. Being multi-spirited,
Okay.
I came in with multiple uh, discarnates attached to me as well.
Mm.
Also, guides that followed me, that were with me here to protect me. Um, Being multi-spirited, we can hold spirits on many different vibrations, right? So a demon is a heavy, dark, unruly, chaotic vibration. A spirit guide might be an angelic or some other entity or being from another galaxy, right? They're connected as well, but they're not necessarily attached in the same way. And then people who have died, or um, I don't know how to say this, but sometimes we live a particular life that we keep the imprint of that lifetime and we carry it with us in order to process it here in another lifetime where we are free to do so. So I had, I don't know, upwards of 10. And so they kept me company. While I didn't talk to other human beings about myself, I talked to them all the time.
Well, I love it. There's so much to talk to you about. I mean, I think I'm gonna have to get you on each one of your books and have these conversations because I love your writing. I love your mind, and
Thank you.
I think you really help expand and broaden my own lens. So I really appreciate it. But I want to focus on Transformative Grief, your book, and it's a beautiful book. And I'm gonna put it in the video in the background. But maybe you can touch on that. How'd that all come about? How'd you manifest that book?
So being multi-spirited, grief was how I was able to recognize each of those energies or beings that were connected with me or attached to me and process the information or messages that they brought and release them
Mm.
or integrate them. So another grief is an integrator. It is a unifier. It helps our personalities, our perspective, our beliefs, um, It helps us to integrate new and higher vibrational ideas by literally, when you grieve, you erase neurons in the brain, which means you are erasing memories, you're erasing belief systems, you're erasing your relationship to what you're losing in your brain as well. So it leaves a neural circuitry that is fresh, and you're able to repopulate it with a new idea or a new experience, which is what we call mourning, right? We put grief is the crying, emotional release, and then mourning is the process that one goes through to change their behavior and relationship to the thing they lost. So transformative grief is all of it. It is like an objective perspective when you can look at beyond the grief and the sadness. There is this huge magical experience that opens you up in ways you can't even imagine, because you have the emotional process. It's like it cracks open the heart and it creates a new light that shines on new information that you wouldn't see otherwise.
In your book, you put, if grief had a marketing slogan, it'll be grief your own way. And I love that. What is grief, and what is the process of grief for people? I know it's all different, right?
It really is, because look, right now we are living, things today are different a little bit, right? Because of all of these shifts in ideas about gender, about sexual orientation, about sexuality, and there's a whole other level of mental health, mental wealth, mental shifting. We have a different relationship where it's not only women that cry, right? Men can cry, right? Like, this is the first time. 20 years ago, that was still an unacceptable idea, right? We still indoctrinated men to believe that you are strong by holding back your tears, right? That's not true for anybody. You are, the stronger you are, the more you cry, and the more you open that lens where you truly are powerful, right? And crying gets you there. So every person will have their own relationship. They're, all over the globe, different cultures, different countries relate to the idea of grief differently. And so every human being is going to have to deal with whatever that lens is that they were given, juxtaposed to how what is in their spirit, right? In my spirit, I'm a crier. I was always going to be a crier because I had the weight of what I was carrying was just too much to stay in. It just wasn't ever going to stay in. So it didn't matter how people around me felt. It didn't matter if I upset them, right? I was just going to be who I am because I couldn't be anything else. Right. But there are lots of people who are kind of in between. They still are, they struggle with their relationship to emotion, their relationship to change, and then their relationship to, again, this idea of power or weakness.
Yeah, I love how you brought that up, because I didn't show emotions for a very long time. I pushed them down. What happens when we suppress our emotions, our grief, like grief, for an example? How does that affect us later down the line when we're not taught how to deal with our emotions, or don't be a girl, told as a little boy,
Yes.
big boys don't
Yes.
cry, be a man.
Yes.
And so what do I do with this stuff if I can't, process these emotions properly?
People split off. Some people who experience intense trauma as children, they disassociate, and little bits and pieces of them, depending on how that is nurtured, they can have multiple personalities. They can have internal issues where all of that grief sits in their body somewhere and creates a dis-ease of some sort. Sometimes when people are born with chronic issues or a malady that they're born with, a congenital issue, sometimes that's grief manifesting itself from another lifetime. So grief is energy, and we have to process that energy in some way. Some people don't have to cry. They can go run it off. I've not been one of those people. To me, they're not the same. I still think that there is an emotional relationship. It's the emotional relationship that helps you shift the mental relationship. And if somebody can do that through exercise or working out, or I think that, again, I am like the epitome of a griever, and my lens is from that perspective. I think that every different lifetime, for example, like you were saying, in some situations, some neighborhoods, some cultures, you can't afford to grieve. Grieving means death. Grieving means something really bad can happen to you. Grieving is a signal to other people to be predators towards you, right? And that's how people receive it. So if you take that, if you've been that person, it doesn't mean that because you had to stuff down your grief, that you are going to get sick, right? Because some people, my dead stepfather, for example, he smoked and drank since he was like 11. And he lived until he lived with emphysema and a cirrhotic liver. And it wasn't until like he was 85 when a brain tumor finally got him. You know what I mean? Like he was just a bull, and he was gonna live. So what somebody experiences isn't always going to be the outcome that other people have, because again, that's karma. We all have our own patterns and how we need to live. And that those patterns are going to be our teachers, right? So the important thing to know about grief is that your body, your mind, and your spirit will always tell you what level you're at and what you need to do. There might come a time where your body is saying, hey, you need to deal with me differently because things are going on that can't be repaired if you continue. Right? But that's about you and your relationship to yourself and how willing you are to listen to the message that grief might have for you in whatever way it shows up.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. And, I'm looking at my own experience, and, in different cultures, we're taught that grieving, if you cry or it's a form of weakness. And later that can turn into addiction or some kind of mental health issues or et cetera.
Absolutely. Yeah. I didn't even touch on addiction. That is one of the prime ways that people address grief, is by trying to transfer that energy into another pattern that gives them a slight bit of anesthetization. That's a long word. Where they anesthetize that feeling, those feelings. They want to stuff them down or shift them or relax or put them outside so they don't have to deal with them directly. But that is never a long-term solution, right? It's never a long-term solution. But dealing with grief and those grief patterns, there are different frequencies of that, right? Because even if somebody gets physically sober, they're still going to deal with their mental patterns and their emotional patterns that have to be processed through and shifted in order to be fully free of those binding patterns.
Can you fart grief out? I'm just joking around.
No, you can't. I have to say, that's funny that you say that, because I have a client who he burps and farts when he that's when he burps, I know he's understood me. Like I am not joking. Like we'll be having this conversation, and then all of a sudden he'll go, and it's like, it's like he gets it. His body is saying that he gets it in that manner.
Wow.
Right? Dude, everybody's body is different, and it's your own conversation with yourself.
What's ancestral grief?
So ancestral grief is, for example, my mother, her father they considered him to be mental ill, and they eventually put him in a hospital, and he died there. But he had anger and he had rages. I believe that he too was multi-spirited. He had lots of different symptoms of multiple things, but I think that he was haunted. And some major tragedies happened in his life, and then that really changed him. And so he would have these rages, and he would tear shit up and break stuff. And again, they looked at that behavior as a mental illness, in such a way to not have compassion for it, I think. Anyway, so my mother was terrified of that.
Mm.
And so I was the one born in my family to process out not only the relationship to mental health or mental dis-ease, but also to grieve and process that rage. Because I, as a spirit, I had experienced an enormous amount of spiritual traumas for, say, 1,000 years. I mean, I had multiple lifetimes of trauma that I brought in to this lifetime to process, which was a part of my grieving. And so ancestral trauma is the trauma that our parents and their parents and their parents and their parents cannot process. And so it follows the generations into the children, and the children maybe are hopefully in a freer place to be able to process it.
Mm.
For example, like right now, I was watching, I started my day watching The Tattooist of Auschwitz. I don't know if you've seen that. It was a book, and now it's on Peacock, and it's a series. And it's for my Conquer Your Karmic Relationships book, I studied a lot about the Nazis for the last 10 years, 15 years. A lot of authors. There's a ton of history coming out to help us more deeply understand what exactly happened and why it happened and how it was allowed to happen, how people allowed it to happen, because people lost their rights in such subtle and simple ways that people didn't notice until they were, thrown in the camp. So anyway, there's a reason why those kinds of art pieces, movies, books, whatever, are coming up in history, is because right now we are processing out those kinds of traumas for all the people who didn't survive it and couldn't process it, right? So we are the ones who are processing for all the ancestors, I guess is what I'm trying to say. We, as an American culture, right, are trying to right the wrongs of the people who started the dynamics in our country.
Mm.
Right? Which is why we're talking about things differently. We're telling truthful stories, still not completely, but we are doing more than we ever have. And it's offering some people to shout loud and proud how they feel. And it's also offering a whole other group to grieve the fact that certain things happened. And then it's also giving a voice of how we're going to change those patterns moving forward and create a future that we can all live in together.
Yeah, thank you. And
So
epigenetics,
yes.
science is now trying to catch up to spirituality, right? And
Mm-hmm.
with epigenetics, and it kind of explains kind of what you were saying right now. Can you touch on that
Yes,
a little bit more about epigenetics?
I can. I mean, to my very small understanding of it, because it's a big topic for sure. But epigenetics is now the understanding that our genes carry light, and that light, we can amplify that light. We can focus on that light. We can shift the amount of light that we are open to, that our body is open to, and actually change patterns on a cellular level in our DNA, right? We've always thought, or the school of thought, I can't give you a time frame. I'm going to say 20 years back and prior, our understanding of DNA was that your DNA is just what it is, and that's it. Whatever, like
Yeah.
if in your DNA you have cancer, you're going to get cancer. Then over the last few decades, we've thought, hey, maybe that's, nurture versus nature, what you were born with based on what you do with it. Now, through epigenetics, there is this whole new understanding and belief system, and now they're gaining some proof, right? Some scientific proof that how you focus your energy, what you do with it, will actually change your body. It'll change your DNA. And so problems you may have started out with, you can completely release from your consciousness with work, with focus.
Yeah, thank you. I was in a AA meeting one time, and there's a lot of Navajo Native Americans, right? And an old timer says it's in their genes, but I said it's multi-generational trauma. I mean, if you look in Arizona, there's a street called Indian Hill Road where they would drive the kids, basically kidnap the kids from their families, take them to this Catholic church. They would cut off their hair, give them a new name, make them forget about their culture and their
Yeah.
language, and punish them if they spoke their language. A lot of them were molested by priests and nuns, and
Yeah.
that still affects us to this day. And that's why there's so
Absolutely.
many Native Americans having problems with alcohol and other substances,
Right.
because of that trauma still affecting us from the past. How do we heal from
Absolutely.
that? So hard.
Well, I think that, look, the most, so we're seeing it on multiple levels. So as an empath, I have spent my lifetime, I cried every day until I was 50. Literally
Mm,
every day. Now crying is just a fun pastime. You know what I mean? But before, it was a lifeline. And I didn't just cry for myself. I cried for all the people that I carried with me. And I
mm,
cried for all the people that they carried with them. And I cried for all the people who could not cry for themselves. And when I would do that, oh my God, it made people so uncomfortable, and especially people from cultures who had been taught that it was unacceptable for them to cry. And I remember having a conversation with a friend, and I'm like, "Look, these aren't my tears; these are your tears." And I am happy. I'm happy because I can. My white skin, my white ladiness gives me permission on some certain levels for people to accept that I cry. That is not true of all women or all people, right? Like our system has set up certain illusions about humanity and about people based on their culture or skin color or whatever, right? That gives an unconscious, okay, you can do that, you're allowed to do this, you're allowed to do that, you're allowed to do, right? It's these stereotypes that we live with, right? But our goal, every human being is intended today to be exactly who they are. And by doing that, one of the I want to say this because this goes along with how you I was able to cry for all of my people. So my healing, my crying, cried for them. That allowed them to heal, right? And that's so energetically, I cleared my line. I did that for all of us, for me in other lifetimes, and all who I loved, and all who was connected to me, right? So every family will have one of those, and our culture, are like here in America, we have many people who are doing that. Everybody has a job, right? Being an
mm,
empath is a job. Being a spokesman is a job. Sometimes spokespeople don't always, they don't need to cry because their job is to put whatever it is into words, right? And maybe they go through a grief process in order to get the words, right? Because truly, when we cry, there's this whole we open up to this whole other frequency of channel,
mm.
right? And new energy and information comes, and there's a whole other level of peace that comes after you have cried, right? Your body shifts. So we this is something that we are doing in conjunction with each other, and everybody has a role in that. And so through that, it's going to enable us to enact different policies, different what's the word I want? Different systems in play to eliminate the old biases that our country is built on.
Hmm. I know in your book you talk about racism, connecting it to grief. Can you help expand on that for us?
So, well, I think that racism is one of the systems. It's one of the biases um, that empowers certain groups and disempowers just about everybody else. So, uh, as we grieve, any bias that we have is going to change, because as you grieve, you are forced to let go of old belief systems that are just no longer functional for where you are and what your future is going to bring you, right? And that's something that I think this kind of processing is inevitable for everyone at some point in
Mm,
this lifetime or the next. But
yeah.
uh, you can't, as you grieve, your heart opens, and as your heart opens, you begin to see people as you see yourself. And this is interesting. So there's been a whole new awakening, especially for white people, to understand the frequencies of racism that for us were subtle. For me, Tracee, they were never really subtle because I had many Black people with me, and so spiritually speaking, I saw through their lens, and so I felt what they felt, and that lens was 1850 slavery, right? That was my lens and the people that I carried with me, and a life that I had lived, right? And so I looked at racism through that. But in this recent reawakening, for all of us, but many more spokespeople have begun to break things down in a way that people who never understood are beginning to understand. When we say that racism in our system, right, our ways of doing things are racist, right? It's not picking on just one person. It's a system that just automatically discounts, or what's the word I want? It doesn't offer the same equal opportunities to, right? People are people want to make it about socioeconomic, but that's ignorance, right? That's just a way to diminish or obfuscate or shift the awareness away from what is really happening. And so when this, over the pandemic, when this awakening began to happen for many people, sorry about that. I just had to, oh, hello. Woo! I did not understand how many people of color saw me. They saw me as white. I did not understand that until I was like 35 and my last Black spirit left me. And I remember like, wow, there is a palpable difference in now how I feel and how I now understand how people see me. Anyway, but the point of this is there was this shift for me. I used the phrase, when I look at somebody, I don't see color. I don't. And then, of course, you have to see color, and you should see color because that's a part of the beauty. And it didn't occur to me that's part of the racist system, right? Is this illusion that it is or is not about color. Because for every person, their color, their skin, their mind, their heart is a part of who they are. Anyway, and the thing that occurred to me, my own correction, because I was, no matter how Black I am on the inside, I am as white as they come, and grew up in a very white culture, even though I grew up in New Mexico, which is very diverse. So I even found it in layers of my belief systems, right? That I just snuck in there. I just snuck in there, and I didn't even know they were there till I was 35. So I had this experience that I was like, wait a second, that's what is true? I really sat for a few days, and I just meditated on what is true for me? What does that mean? And I realized that when I look at somebody, I see them as I see myself. Because in fact, I have held many cultures and ways of life in my spirit. And so I feel at home. I feel at ease. I see somebody for who they are and where they're coming from, far beyond what my education or my presence may imply. So that's what became real for me. And I think that with empathy, all of us, right? And one of the things that helps us with empathy is grief. When we are willing to grieve and admit when information we have isn't correct, it's not true, right? Correctness doesn't mean right or wrong. It means not true, not real. So when we can recognize that we've had a belief system or an imprint or an echo of a thought or a behavior that just isn't truthful for everyone, and that's how we know if something's true, is because it's true for everyone. We are all human beings, and we all deserve and are entitled to a beautiful life, to beauty somehow, some way, right? That is an entitlement. That's a truth. Everybody's going to have money? Probably not. but you don't need money to have a beautiful life. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I think that grief helps us to access those deeper levels of the fundamental truths that we were born with, that we all share.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I think it was yesterday I put up a picture of a Hispanic guy with tattoos on his neck, and he had a Raider hat.
Mhm.
And I put an awakening is a shift in perception in harmony with the oneness of life. And
I saw
that's kind of
that.
odd it's kind of odd to have that kind of picture, that image with that quote.
Sure.
Because, you know,
Right.
growing up, I look at my life and I remember as a kid, I would watch Hollywood, I would watch movies. And anytime I seen a person wearing this spacesuit is someone that's going to be a drug addict, a drug dealer, a gangster, someone robbing
Yes.
someone, someone raping someone, just a bad
Right.
guy. But I never seen someone wearing this spacesuit saving the world or being the president in the movies, you know. And so it's already telling me who I'm going to be, you know, these
Yes.
elite.
Right. It's this subtle thing that just fucking sneaks in there. I don't know if I can say
Yeah.
that, but it just,
Yeah, I know.
right.
Yeah,
Like
you're right.
that's I think that people don't understand is these biases that we have about other people. It's sneaky. You know, if you
Mm.
repeat something over and over and over again, you and others are going to start to believe it. And then you're going to be lazy and take it as science.
It's about changing the story, like you were talking about. And you write about that in your book. I'll probably have you talk on that a little bit later before we end this
Mm-hmm.
thing about changing the story. But yeah, I really appreciate it. Is there a connection with trauma and grief? I mean, can you help us elaborate on that more?
Yes, yes, I can. So trauma is the intake. Grief is the output, right? So if we take something in, trauma when we say trauma, it's because there's an open wound, or there is this something has entered into the space and caused such a rift that it can't just automatically reconnect. It needs another force field or another energy or another person to come in and clear the space and bring the two sides back together. And that's what grief does. Right? So when somebody has a trauma, right, and it can be, sometimes I think there not sometimes, there are children that are born into trauma, and they are born to process the traumas of their mothers or their fathers, right? And they will do that all the while creating patterns of their own, right? And creating traumas upon traumas upon traumas, right? So the word trauma, I'm going somewhere. I know that I am. Trauma, because I think it's a buzzword. And so I also want to connect this idea not just to the debilitating things that happen to us, but like we're saying, these subtle ideas that aren't truthful. Those create a rift over time that leads to the need for grief to be the integrator, right? So when somebody uses the word, oh my God, they're all the drama, I can't take all the drama. Well, drama equals trauma, right? If there is a trauma somewhere, a person is going to respond to that consciously or unconsciously in a way that's going to get that message to other people that they are hurting, right? And then grief is the response to that. And sometimes grief can be getting a different set of information or being around a person who has already processed that information. So you, in your life, as a broadcaster, all the work that you do for yourself spiritually, the more you process your grief, the more you reconcile your traumas, you broadcast that energy and information, giving anyone who hears you permission to do the same. You give them an archetype or a roadmap energetically they just have to be in your midst, in your town, in your city, in your state, wherever you are. Someone who needs what you have will clue into it, and they'll get it, because that's who you are. That's what you do. And they may not be able to use it immediately, but it's like it'll download, and when they're ready for it, it'll like awaken. And that's one of the things that we're seeing right now politically, that over the last 12 years, these deep-seated biases and fears and unprocessed grief and unprocessed rage, unprocessed, unacknowledged belief systems that no longer serve us are awakening in people. And they sound crazier than all get out. Right? We can say, oh my God, these people are losing their mind. Well, no, this was something that wasn't able to be processed. And believe it or not, it was probably worse before.
Yeah.
But people are awakening with these they're not new ideas, with these very old, archaic ideas, but they're all coming out to be in the forefront, to be addressed and to be responded to, and to be transformed into something lighter and better that we can all share.
Thank you. Yeah, that collective trauma, right? That unhealed, unresolved collective trauma is playing out right now. I just recorded with Antonia. She wrote a book called Dismantling the Third Dimension, and it's a really great book. And she said yesterday that pain doesn't behave very well. And I love that, because you could see people's behavior, but people are in a lot of pain. That unresolved trauma, like you said, it means wound in Greek, right?
Yes.
Everyone's disconnected. I shared yesterday about the problem with love thy neighbor as thyself is no one loves themselves anymore. We live in a system that teaches you not to love you. We live in a system that doesn't give you time to heal or have time for yourself. And it's just creating a lot of mental illness. It's creating addiction. It's creating all kinds of stuff, disconnection and hatred and all those fruits that it's producing, because no one's really questioning it. I only see a few people like Marianne Williamson and certain people really pinpointing the cause, the deeper, not just putting band-aids on stuff, but really looking at the root cause of stuff. And it's crazy.
Right. It is. It really is. And I think what suits this part of the conversation is that the truth exists in your heart. It doesn't always exist in your mind. It doesn't exist in your gut, because sometimes we hold a lot of fear and physical and soul memory of deep-seated pains. But if you pull all that energy into your heart and you read the situation through your heart, you're always going to get an answer that includes everyone, and that it's not just for you. There's always going to be a way to move forward in any situation that includes more than less.
Yeah, thank you. Like I always tell people, I don't care about your religion. I don't care about your political beliefs or so on. I only care about you. I care about you. And, we live in a world, if you don't think like me or act like me or believe like me, you're against me. And it's so much. Yeah, it's crazy. So I really appreciate that. What are some of the misconceptions of grief? When I think of grief, it's when you lose a loved one. But you said there's many different layers and different forms of grief. It's not just losing a loved one.
Absolutely. Well, like you were talking about, human trafficking, slavery, addictions, like that self-sabotage, right? Hatred and anger, believe it or not, those are heart attacks waiting to happen, because in order to achieve that, there is a restriction in the veins in the body that don't allow for blood flow. It literally doesn't allow for the flow of life, right? So, let's say, the rhetoric that's going on right now. There's a lot of fearful rhetoric, and on some level, we have to learn how to be critical thinkers. And we have to teach ourselves how to be to critically think about things that we, and I think that what does it mean to be a critical thinker? It means to stop, take a moment, look at it, and see if it feels right. Is this accurate? Ask myself, is this accurate? Where does this come from? And you use all the tools that we have to look at the information that's coming in, instead of just reacting to it and getting angry at it, or trying to shut people down because of it. Taking it in and just saying, it's all going to be fine, and it's okay to know the truth. Just let it be okay. It's okay to know the truth right now. I know it's going to be okay to know the truth, because what happens is that a person, like, let's say somebody, the clerk at the grocery store, they deal with, 500 people in a day. And let's say 20% of those people were pissed off, right? That's 100 people with a nasty attitude that one person is going to have to right? So when they get home, they need to do something with that energy. They need to ground it. They need to give themselves permission to go, break some stuff or cry it out or get a good run in or to do something with all of that energy to process it. And sometimes, there's a lot of passive aggressive behavior. Like, so when somebody's angry, they're violent or physically angry, we have ideas about what to do with that. But when somebody is passive aggressive and snotty and sarcastic, or they won't look you straight in the face, or they dismiss you with their tone or their behavior, that's emotional, and that stuff sits right here. And you need to, as a public servant, you have got to go home and give yourself permission to unload that, because it's not yours to carry. Sometimes, and this is on a spiritual level, one of the things you can do, it doesn't necessarily eliminate the need for grief, but sometimes if a person goes home and they take a deep breath and they just send everybody whom they saw that day, send their energy back to them. See them as all these little threads of energy just going back to wherever they came from. And that consciousness alone will help you reconnect to who you are, where you're at, what you need, and how you feel. And then if there is a need for grief at that point, then, some tears can come, and you can be right as rain in a short period of time. But, when we don't do that, and we get up one morning and the coffee maker's not working, like that's when you want to, get the AK out. Like, I know we don't put those two things together, but it's true. That's why these people are losing their minds, because things have been building for a long time now, and in a confrontational way, right? And people in our culture, we don't support education how we need to. Our parents are too busy to educate on a lot of levels. Like, there's on so many levels, the majority of people don't have enough insight or practice to be able to manage that on their own, right? It's something it's a learned experience, and we can get it through religion, but religion is wonky right now. There's nobody, like, when it comes to religions, people don't want to trust, and nor should they. It's not about trusting the church. It's about trusting yourself and your relationship to the creator, whomever that is for you. Right. But that's not, again, those are things that are new ideas in our culture. And so the darkest places haven't gotten there yet. And those people are the most susceptible. Right.
Yeah, you're right. And you talked about on a spiritual level. I love how you break down spiritual trauma. What is spiritual trauma?
Well, spiritual trauma means trauma that you carry with you on higher frequencies of your feelings, your belief systems, and literally imprints in your spirit that if the trauma is too much in this lifetime, you need to bring it to another lifetime to actually process it. Right? So in this lifetime, as a child, I would have this nightmare of a drug dealer was running after me with a syringe of heroin. And I would live, this man would come to me in all different forms, and he always looked the same. He always had a white crispy shirt that had short sleeves and was rolled up like they did in the 40s and 50s. And in the straight leg pants, like he had a very specific look. And I don't know that I ever saw his face necessarily. I didn't, but it was this image of this person coming to me with a syringe, and I would always avoid him. I'd always get away from him. Sometimes the dream would be recurring, and it would be in different places in my neighborhood. Like one time, my neighbor Nancy, I was hiding behind their maple tree. It was this huge maple tree, and I was hiding behind it, and he was looking for me, And every dream, eventually, he wouldn't get to me, and I would wake up. And then when I wrote the book Heal Your Soul History, I finally was able to put together all the different levels. When I got to New York City, I was able to put together all the pieces of the story. And another big piece of the story is as a person, I never believed that I would live past 25. And I understood what it was like to have to be shot with a gun, right? And I wasn't afraid of death. Like, there were all of these things that I came in with. And then what happened is that when I put all of those images together, when I was ready, right, I had grieved all of these different things simultaneously. But when I was ready, I came together and I put the whole story together, and I understood that I had been found by a predator in the 40s, or in the probably between the 20s and 40s, and spent many years with this man. I was a singer. I was a jazz singer. I sang at the time, and I was like his mule on a lot of levels.
Hmm.
And eventually I was high and I was murdered in his midst. And so I died in that condition. And so in this lifetime, every dream I had, every time I cried, every relationship to drugs, I had a lot of druggy friends, but I never would do drugs because I was like, no, right? So I had all of these things that when it finally came to seeing the whole picture, when I was prepared to do that, I had to grieve in waves, right? Over many years to process out what that lifetime did to me, right? And so all of that energy and information, I brought it in, it like encapsulated in these messages that awakened as I was ready. Each dream I had, each experience I had with a person. I had a whole relationship to music, which I love music. I love to sing, and I resent the music business like nobody's like I just like I had issues, So all of those things put together, eventually I was able to understand and witness this story and grieve and release her once and for all.
Hmm.
And that was, once I had done that, I was able to write Heal Your Soul History, that contains 5 different stories of spiritual trauma that I had carried.
Yeah, and it's a great book. It's right in back of me right here. And yeah, I would love to get you back on and talk about that book. And losing a pet, losing a loved one, it's really hard to deal with. What
It
kind of
is.
advice, or how do you touch on that in the book for people?
Well, so here's the thing. This has everything to do with one's philosophy.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna say that my philosophy is right. But here's the thing. When somebody dies, they go through a process where their spirit begins to leave their body, and eventually, once the spirit is really gone, the body can die. And
Wow.
when like Jimmy Carter died today. I don't know if you know that, but Jimmy Carter just died. I love him so much. Now that he's dead, does my love stop? Does my respect stop? It doesn't. I love him. And I started to say, I love him, or I loved him, but no, I still love him. That is still very real. Like the person that he was able to bring, especially in his last 30 years, is something that we really needed. And I love him for that.
Hmm.
So what will happen now that we won't see him in the media, his spirit has now moved on. We will now see his spirit in all that he has created, in his legacy. And those who are close to him, their grief will bring them a new relationship to his spirit, right?
Hmm.
That's what grief is for, is it allows us to change our relationship to that to whom was living, and to now how they are present, right? Because just because we don't have a body doesn't mean our spirit isn't still intact. But there is always, in grief, when a loved one dies, there is a period of time. For me, it was about 3 months where I had zero mental, emotional connection to them. When my mom, for example, when my mom died, I mean, she and I were so, like, in her 9 months of in the dying process, she got cancer. And in that process, she and I were, there was no time and space between us ever. But when she died, that it was like that door shut. And that, like, to not, and that's how most people experience loss of a loved one. But that sense of density in between you and what you knew has to be there, so that you can cry and grieve. And when you do, again, you open up your heart to the channels of frequency that can now access them when it is time. And sometimes it's time and sometimes it's not. My dad died when I was 12, and I never had that kind of connection with him all through, I think the first time I had any kind of connection with him on a spirit level was, I'm going to say, gosh, almost 30 years after he died. So, but the process of grief is intended for us to change the way in which we relate to what we had to what we have now. And it's meant to bring you into the present moment. And like I said, we always have spiritual relationships with our loved ones on some level, based on how, like, if that is included in your philosophy. If it's possible, if you believe it's possible for you, it's possible for you. And I think with animals, I think animals offer us oftentimes a relationship to unconditional love that we don't often get from judgmental people, right? And all people are judgmental, right? Judgment is the way we assess a situation. So our animals don't necessarily do that. And so oftentimes we feel like there is a loss of love for ourselves that maybe we need to be giving ourselves. And so we learn that through grieving our animals, I think.
Yeah, thank you. You kind of answered my question. I wanted to ask you about what happens to us when we die. Do you believe in a heaven and a hell like we're taught in religion? Or do you think we'd go to other planes, other dimensions, other planets?
Welcome to hell.
Yeah, exactly right.
It is right here. Like, it's how you see, how you live. I mean, I think that there are some physical world truths, but how you perceive those truths and how you create that world for yourself. And those are in fact when we talk about 4D and 5D, there's third dimension, which is this planet. And then there's fourth dimension, which is our ability to, hear and understand energy, right? On a broader level. And then the fifth dimension is our ability to see and perceive on finer frequency levels. And because things are broader, that's Tituba, just so you see, that's my little kitten Tituba. Saw a tail going, woo. Yes, there are portals and white tunnels of light that get us from one dimension to another. Absolutely. It doesn't matter if you don't believe it. Like I have a sister who when she's like dust to dust, when I die, I'm going to be dust. And I'm like, okay, I don't try to fight that, because why? Right. My mother never really thought about that or looked at that until when she was ready to die. And those were when she was open to those conversations. But I guess I'm saying that. So it's like when you get into conversations with people, it's like, it doesn't matter who's right, what is right or what is not. There's only somebody's truth, because their truth is going to give them the perspective that they need and should be respected. It's the perspective that they must have in order to take them on the journey that they need to be on. But yes, there are multiple dimensions, and right now we're in a particular frequency, and there will come a time when we leave and go to another frequency. And there are tunnels to do that. You can astral travel. Again, heaven is something that we create right here, and it's something that we project out into the world, as is hell. And purgatory is everything else in between, in that stasis.
Yeah, the only thing we need to be safe from is our own hellish thinking. And when you find
Yes.
heaven within yourself, heaven will shine on those around you. Yeah, I love
It
that.
will.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about ghosts left behind in your book. What happens to what does that mean, ghosts left behind? And what happens to what people experiencing the paranormal? What are ghosts?
Well, so a ghost is an energy imprint. So let's say one time I did a house healing. This house was very haunted, and this woman, for the 50 years that she lived in this home, she was the original owner, and she and her husband built this home, and she had a little sewing room, and the door to that sewing room, colleagues of mine they were doing a restoration on it, and they decided to remove her sewing room and take the door away and make the room bigger. Bring two rooms together. And so this imprint of this woman who had walked into that room, opened that door, a billion times in 50 years, every single day. That energy, when they removed that door, she was mad. She was cursing. Like this energy could no longer follow the pattern, and it reacted to that. And so I was able to clear her energy and send it back to her. It was her essence. Right? When we have really great things or really bad things happen to us anywhere, we leave essence in the space where those things happen. And those create ghosts. And then when we die, sometimes, somebody who dies but doesn't cross over, that's called a discarnate. That is a spirit without a body, but they're still locked into the frequency of energy, which is like the etheric. They're still etheric energy. And so sometimes people think of ghosts as a discarnate, and ghosts are energy imprints where a discarnate is an actual spirit that is earthbound. Right? And then we have entities, then we have intergalactic beings, then we have demonic beings or other energies that have never incarnated. Right? So when you can call them all ghosts, and a lot of people do. But when you break it down, each of them have a different frequency, and they're different things.
Do you believe aliens grieve?
So here's the thing. I think that certainly there are cultures of beings that have. I think that one of the things why so many alien beings love and appreciate our human experience is because emotion is one of the things that is very unique to being human. Emotion is the way we bring higher frequency from the creator down through our body, and then we interpret that energy or information through our emotions. And we have 1,000 different emotions, right? We have so many words that express emotion. So, I am not an alien expert by any stretch, but I think that it's something that we've evolved into being able to master. And I think it's something that so any other, if there is another galactic being that has lived in this process that we're living in, definitely. I also think that when we see Star Trek and a lot of the different ways that we have been indoctrinated to think about intergalactic beings, none of them ever feel emotion. Like, right? They're very stoic and they don't express much. So maybe there's some reality to that. Maybe there are other beings people who don't want to deal with their emotions talk about it being a higher frequencied way to live. If you don't, like to be beyond them, be beyond bad things. I don't think while you're going to be a human being, you're not ever going to be beyond bad things. The only thing that makes you be in a position to be beyond bad things is to open-heartedly and authentically address things as they are, as they come. And the more you can do that, the quicker things will go. And so if there's a bad feeling, you can move right through it. Or if there's a situation that you can't avoid, you'll get the intuition and you'll avoid it. You'll go the other direction. You'll, whatever. But you'll be able to, if you can shift it, you will shift it with that consciousness of goodness, but here and now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. What did Wayne Dyer say? He said, a hostile person lives in a hostile world. A loving person lives in a loving world, same world.
Yes.
What brings me to maybe the last question. At the very end of your book, you talk about grieving in the system we live in, and then you talk about changing the system we live in. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, if you don't mind?
Sure. I think every individual has to address their role, their behavior, their thoughts, and their feelings about the world that they live in. And how you do, like you have to, at some point, every person is on an evolution to learn to break down their own walls and to open up and to, at very least, value life, right? I mean, that is the point. All life, all critters, all plants, wind, rain, all life. And each of us are on our own road to that. And the systems will change the more we begin to respect the smallest beings of our existence. The plants, the insects, the animals, human beings, the planet, right? And so I know that when I think about this, I feel like, we can just do X, Y, and Z, and it's going to help our system. But the truth is our system is created from unruly people with disassociated people with broken hearts. And the more every single individual takes responsibility for their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own experience, right? You said if you're living in a hostile world, you have to create a peaceful world to live in. Peaceful, not loving, just peaceful. Because when you can get to peaceful, then you can contemplate loving. Right? But you can't start at a hostile world and think of just flipping to a loving world, because that's not helpful. You have to begin where you are and go to the next level for you, whatever that is. And you have to be responsible for that. And not only that, you have been empowered to do that. You, every individual, every person hearing this, you have the power to affect yourself and your life and change your own heart and your own behavior. You've been given all of the information you need. All you have to do is call on it and do that until it arrives. So that's how the systems are going to change, to be inclusive and honoring.
Kind of like that Gandhi quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world."
Yes.
Hopefully we're heart-centered with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Maybe you could share how to find you, some links in your website.
Yes, you can go to TraceeDunblazier.com. That's TraceeDunblazier.com. And then all of my socials are pretty much at GoTracee with 2 E's or at Tracee Dunblazier. So if you can go and you can also hashtag be a slayer, and that's where you can find all of my products, and that hashtag be a slayer will lead you to all my socials as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And to find your books and stuff, you can find them on that website as well.
Yes, you can find them all there. You can also, anywhere where books are sold, all of my stuff is available. If they don't have it on hand, they can order it.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to end it with a quote from your book, Transformative Grief. And,
wonderful.
Hey, how'd you come up with the cover, by the way, before I read that?
Oh my God. I did not. It was the magical perspective of my publisher. And it's interesting. I didn't really have any input. They offered it to me and I'm like, oh my God, that is it. And that is so true for me, because one of the things that I was so deeply fearful of when Jaws came out, that's what this also reminds me of Jaws, the woman swimming in the ocean,
right.
doo-doo. And that's how people feel about grief sometimes, right? It's that big shark in the ocean. So anyway, I love it so much. So it was Schiffer Publishing came up with that brilliant idea.
Awesome. I'll manage it with your words. Every day be mindful of the rise and fall of your emotions and the insights that appear. No matter large or small, these blissful moments of truth and the devastating plunges into darkness will always give you to a lighter, metamorphosed you. Only you can make the choice for yourself to open your hearts to a living, compassionate, and love of yourself, others, and the world around you. 10,000 blessings to you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. This has been delightful. We have to set up another one.
Yeah, thank you. I would love to have you back. So hopefully we can do that soon. Namaste. Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a break. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on the day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.